As the Minister for Education, but also as the father of 2 children with dyslexia and the son of the founding Vice President of the Specific Education and Learning Difficulties Association of South Australia, I take a real interest in dyslexic children and all children with learning difficulties. This Outside the Square DVD is a very important resource for teachers and for parents so that they can identify children early in the piece with learning difficulties, cater for those children in terms of a whole of school approach to their learning, and make sure that every Australian child, no matter what their learning difficulty, reaches their full potential.
What is dyslexia? Dyslexia means difficulty with words.
Dyslexia is a learning difficulty that affects the child's ability to develop a strong understanding of written language.
This is the child that seems bright and capable yet struggles with reading, writing and spelling.
Dyslexia is a brain-based learning difference. It is caused by a difference in the way the brain processes information.
Children have difficulty hearing the sounds in words and problems with sound letter association.
Dyslexia is on a continuum from mild to severe.
Reading affects every aspect of education. If you can't read, it makes it very hard to learn.
Dyslexia can impact on other areas of learning. It can affect maths, language, attention, and memory.
Dyslexia is a lifelong and persistent difficulty. It cannot be cured and does not disappear with age.
Children with dyslexia aren't recognised or supported in our schools.
Dyslexia is a disability that is recognised under the DDA. It is a disorder or malfunction that results in the person's learning differently from a person without the disorder or malfunction.
We need our education system to acknowledge and understand dyslexia.
We need early identification with screening in the first year of school to red flag children at risk of reading difficulties.
We need our teachers to provide explicit instructions in evidence-based reading methods.
We need targeted early intervention using multi-sensory structured language.
We need our school to provide accommodations and assistive technology to help us to succeed.
We need our universities to include evidence based on reading methods and dyslexia awareness in the teachers' training courses.
We are creative, insightful, and divergent thinkers.
We generate new ideas and find different ways to solve problems.
We see the big picture and think outside of the square.
Dyslexia is trouble with everything. Dyslexia is connected to every daily life, that every activity that you do.
Teachers say I need to do better, but I can't do better. It's my best work.
To try harder. I don't really like that at all because it makes me really angry and I've already been trying hard.
I work extremely hard but never get the score I really want.
When I have to do tests, it's very hard to read the questions and hard to work them out.
She would just sit at her desk and she wouldn't come over to help me, or she wouldn't explain things well enough.
Making you do all this work and you have to stay in your whole lunchtime instead of going out and playing.
Like really struggling with my work. I just wasn't keeping up with everyone.
I found class really hard and I found that I wouldn't be asking for help at all. I would daydream and keep to myself.
I'd muck around a lot in class. I just really wouldn't do my work that much.
I'd rather get in trouble by doing no work instead of doing all of the work but getting it all wrong.
Other than that, I switched off. Didn't listen because I couldn't. I didn't know what they were talking about. One of my teachers just wrote stuff on the board and said, do this. You don't even know what it means.
I know that I have to write essays and everything, but just to be able to do prac and do something I'm good at without putting myself down and trying my hardest but still not getting there because I can't write, I can't put words into sentences, and it's just so hard.
Because you always see the person in the class who's struggling and gets special help and the teacher's always hovering You don't want to be identified with that person because the kids, they're going to think you're stupid and dumb. That's how it always felt. So I always tried to hide from that. And the teachers called me out to the front. I didn't want to go in the front. It was horrible. And so the way for me, I would hide. And it worked.
I was very angry with myself a lot. And I always used to say, even now I say sometimes that I'm just no good at anything, and I just don't want to do anything because I'm just not good at it.
Primary school was the worst of my schooling. I had so much difficulty and no one could pick it up. And it's really hard being a student and going to school each day, being terrified to walk through the gates of a school, knowing that you just won't get any help.
I hated it when people said you're dumb. It just made me feel like I was nothing. It made me feel like I was worthless. Pointless being at school. I didn't get anything done. So yeah, that made my confidence drop dramatically. Straight down to a frozen wasteland.
Yes, correct. A visit to
Alaska.
Good man.
The last.
These children, as early as prep and kindergarten, they're going into class and they're seeing all the other children learning the alphabet sounds, starting to decode these simple words, and they're thinking, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? Am I broken? To feel that at age 5, you wouldn't wish that on anyone.
So as soon as you find out about dyslexia, the doors open up for you. It takes away the pressure, because when you don't know what's wrong, you think you're silly.
But why did it take 5 years? Why did it take 5 years before we got a diagnosis? Why do schools ignore the early warning signs? I just don't understand why schools still tend not to like even to use the D word, dyslexia. When we got her formally assessed, her teacher was shocked that she had dyslexia. And she actually said to me, I've never taught a dyslexic child before. And I thought to myself, well, you have. You just didn't know it, because there's so many out there that don't know that they have dyslexia. And I feel lucky that we do know about Ashley's dyslexia, because we were able to help her and we were able to teach the teachers how to help her.
We went and had him assessed, and sure enough, the result came back that he had moderate dyslexia. But that was a relief. At least we knew what he had. We could then embark on this journey to find out what we could do to help him. But of course, then we have the struggle where the teachers are really not well informed about dyslexia and don't know how to deal with it either. So there's this reluctance to talk about it, reluctance to give him the help that he needs.
It's very frustrating when you know what's happening and you know what can be done, but if on the other end they don't believe you or don't know what to do, it's an uphill battle.
Nothing. I'm sick of being a nag now. I'm sick of constantly emailing, sick of having to, every year when she goes into a new class with a new teacher, having to go through the whole rigmarole again. It's very frustrating and upsetting, because now I'm starting to think 3 years in a row that why bother? They're not going to do anything for her.
Dyslexia is not a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of access. Mason's articulate, he's curious and clever, but his struggles with reading and writing impact every area of his learning. Mason requires understanding, accommodations, and access to assistive technology. He needs extra time when reading and writing.
I guess I just see that there's so many other families in our school that come to me now and ask me, how do I get that help that you had for your son? And I think that the answer is that you have to go and get it privately at this point in time in our education system. There are some wonderful teachers who go out of their way to help children because they understand learning difficulties and dyslexia, but they're the rare gems. And I think that the system has to change.
To try and feel what it would be like in a classroom where you're constantly being told, geez, you're naughty, you're so naughty, I wish you'd concentrate more. And there's been constantly being told that all the time, that you're feeling low about your self-esteem already, and then you're getting told that you're no good.
And then they get to a point, well, why try? Why should I try? It's better to muck up and be naughty and just pretend I'm lazy because people think I'm that anyway. So why bother? Why bother putting the effort in if I don't get anything at the end?
Just to have a voice, for him to be able to go to school and just love it, and to learn and be successful, and to know that he's okay, he's perfect. There's nothing wrong with him, it's just other people don't understand him.
So wrong that it can impact on the child so much in their early years and impact on their self-esteem and impact on their learning. It just shouldn't be like this, and it doesn't have to be like this.
Love is written L-O-V-E, L-O-V-E, I love you. Bit faster. Love is written L-O-V-E, L-O-V-E, I love you.
You know, our children are hurting and we're hurting too. So it becomes a really big issue in our families. We then go and speak to teachers. We say to teachers, you know, what's going on? You know, why isn't my son or daughter learning? The teachers look confused because they're not trained in dyslexia. Yet we all know that dyslexia is a very real neurobiological difficulty where brain cells don't talk to each other as well as they should be. Perhaps they're not as effective as and efficient. Doesn't mean our kids aren't smart. That's the thing about dyslexia. These kids can be really smart, but when it comes to formal learning, that's when it's really difficult.
Well, usually they go to school feeling confident, like most other kids do. And then in the first couple of years, they run into this reading situation. And they assume, I think, in the beginning that, you know, it'll be sorted out. Their parents say, you know, maybe you're just a bit slower, and the teachers say, maybe you're a bit slower. It'll click into place. But this continues, and if it's not diagnosed, what happens is that the child fails again and again, and nobody explains to them. So their feeling becomes one of shame. There's shame. Many people hide it, and they feel marginalised. They are marginalised because they can't participate.
Year after year of doing that is very, very frustrating. Often these children by about year 9 are saying to their parents, I've had enough of this, I don't want to go anymore. You can strap a little child into a car seat and make them go to school. It's harder to do that with a 14-year-old child. So school refusal on the grounds of untreated and unaccommodated disability, sadly, is a lot more common than we like to think.
We're just saying, oh, look, they're failing. They're still failing. They've failed, and not intervening anywhere. The ramifications of that, as we know, are the mental health issues, the anxiety, the depression, the disengagement, the social exclusion, the difficulty getting a job, the high rate of incarceration, poor literacy, unable to access healthcare, can't read medication labels, can't even vote, he can't fill in a pamphlet, he can't apply for a job.
They're at risk of depression, unemployment, underemployment. It's there's no ifs and buts about it. We know that it's definitely the case. It's been measured again and again. The number of people in prison with dyslexia is, it's above the norm by far. So what we're looking at here is certainly a problem of individual suffering, but it's also a national social problem and a national economic problem.
I really feel it's a human rights issue to leave kids, to know kids, a certain amount of kids, at least 10% are going to fail automatically at school and not do anything about it is nothing short of criminal.
So what we're doing is wasting talent and causing suffering.
Have a check of this one, Joanna.
Happy birthday.
As a speech pathologist, it frustrates me intensely that people equate having difficulties with speech
with communication, with language, so with expressive language, with expressing yourself, or with processing, with having learning difficulties and not being intelligent. And the same thing goes for children with reading difficulties. I mean, the number of times I've heard people say, oh, the parents obviously didn't read enough to him at home, or he's just lazy, he should try harder, he's clearly not got any aptitude for this. And then they kind of extrapolate that to everything. Very frustrating.
This is a population of people whose potential is very regularly underestimated. And the reason that I think that they're extremely capable is because I've been doing this for a long time. And I've seen some remarkable things happen in this practice.
Another misconception is that it can't be identified until they're 7 or 8 and approaching grade 3, when we can identify the weaknesses and their strengths much earlier than that.
And I had people say to me, oh, dyslexia. Isn't that when kids read words back to front and there's something wrong with their eyes? That was from the 1920s. And people still think that's what dyslexia is. That was like dyslexia was first discovered by, or first described in the literature by an ophthalmologist or an eye doctor or something way back in the early 1900s. And that view has still stuck.
There are a few really common misconceptions. Possibly the most common one is that because written language is a visual thing, people assume that therefore reading difficulties must be a visual problem. And there's a huge body of research suggesting that, in fact, the problems are to do with a subtle language processing difficulty, phonemic awareness related, phonological processing related difficulties, about sound structure in language. And so when people think about dyslexia, they think about letter reversals, and they think about word reversals, and they think about tinted lenses and those types of issues. But in fact, we know that for the vast majority of kids, the underlying issue is not to do with visual processing.
A syllable is a beat in a word. Everyone, what's the syllable? A syllable is a beat in a word.
I think one of the things that I've learnt along the way is that even though there's been knowledge about dyslexia out there in the field for a long, long time, and it seems that it's taken a great deal of time for it to come through into classrooms. First of all, that the phenomenon actually exists, and that's the case especially here in Australia. You know, over the years I've seen so many teachers who were really crying out for help about the situation. They knew they had someone in their class that they couldn't quite pin it down. And because there's about 3 people in every class, most teachers will have had that experience.
The Dyslexia Working Party report came about because of, I think, a very high level of lobbying, particularly from parents across Australia at a federal government level. If there could be a package, if there could be something that was put in place to ensure that students with dyslexia, no matter what school they attended in Australia, would receive some level of support to ensure that they could participate as well as possible.
For many years now, I and other people have been trying to call out and say, look, this situation's here and there are things that can be done about it. And I've learnt along the way that, you know, you've got to be able to get knowledge from the universities to the schools and to government, and that's not necessarily an easy task.
The set of recommendations were put to the federal government. They in turn were reviewed by federal departments of education, disability. They were taken seriously, they were reviewed, but I suppose, as happens with many of these very good reports as they are, they tend to end up perhaps gathering dust on a shelf somewhere, because the reality is that not a lot has come out of it.
So there's been a debate in the field about whether we should even use the term dyslexia, because it kind of medicalises the condition and makes it sound like some kind of separate syndrome. And it's true that dyslexia is not some separate condition. We're talking about a continuum of reading, and they're simply the children who are the ones who are struggling the most with acquiring that ability. So in that sense, it's not a syndrome. But it is it certainly exists, because those are those children who fall at the bottom of the distribution that we need to identify, because they're going to need more intensive effort in order to be able to learn to read well. And there are very many conditions that are a continuum, but we would still give them a label. So hypertension is high blood pressure. You choose a point on the blood pressure scale where you decide that somebody has hypertension or not. Now, that doesn't mean we would say that hypertension doesn't exist. It just means that we understand that we're talking about a continuum, and that identifying those people and understanding how they learn to read will have direct implications for everybody else on that continuum as well.
The children who continue to struggle despite really good intervention are often the ones that we would identify as being children with learning disorders. And when we're talking about reading disorders, we're talking about those students who have dyslexia. I guess realistically, dyslexia is difficulty with words.
Dyslexia is real. It's something that impacts on 2 or 3 children in every single classroom, and that's every single classroom all around Australia. So what you've got is kids who are struggling for really legitimate reasons. They're the children who are trying their hardest, and they just can't quite grasp the reading and the writing and the decoding.
Very early on, even in preschool and the first year of school, the kinds of the kind of red flags you'd be looking for would be a child who'd be struggling with phonological awareness tasks, who'd be struggling with learning their letters, who might be struggling with some basic verbal memory, short-term memory type tasks. Those would be the things that you would see as the risk factors. Moving down the track, really important to assess all the key components of reading. As we talked about earlier, there's that sounding out capacity, and you really need something like a nonsense word reading task to test that, because you need to check the child is not just learning the words off by heart, but they actually know how to do that sounding out process. So an early sign of a child who might be having difficulties is a child who has difficulty if you give them a list of nonsense words to read. They can't sound them out. They can't say, GOP is GOP. The other thing you would want to do is test their word recognition skills. So as I said, after that sounding out process, children need to move to a more fluent recognition process. And some children struggle with that stage. So they're okay at learning to sound out, but they have trouble with that, developing that fluent recognition system. And we like to test that by giving them words that they'll get wrong if they sound them out. So we might give them yacht. If they say yatched, then you'd be going, okay, what's going on here? Now, that would be fine if a child in kindergarten did that, because of course they don't know yacht yet. But if a child in year 5 was still saying yatched, you'd be starting to think, perhaps they need some work on building their word recognition skills. So they would be the 2 really key basic skills that I think would be red flags if a child was struggling with them. Basic sounding out and simple sight word recognition.
T-H, E-N-Y, 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 T-H, E-N-Y, we all spell they together.
Prep Kinder 1, you're looking for children who are struggling to acquire the skills to go on and read. So having trouble learning the letter sounds of the letters, having trouble stringing those across to form words. I don't think teachers need a degree in identification to see and hear the children that are struggling in their classrooms. So we want them to feel empowered that if they can see and hear that a child is struggling, that they've got the skills to get in and take them to the next step, which is to teach them the alphabetical principle, teach them how those letters work. Don't just assume that a sight word list and a PM reader going home is going to help every single child in their class. Even those children that may make that magical shift from reading, we know benefit from understanding a symbol-sound relationship.
You notice these bright, bubbly kids who hit school ready and raring to learn to read, and very quickly you see this weight descend on them as they watch other kids in their class whip through reading boxes, move their way through the spelling groups, and it just destroys these kids.
Some of the key indicators to look for are, even before they start school, you may notice them having difficulty with picking up rhymes or nursery rhymes or pronouncing long words. They may struggle with sequencing of ideas or stories, which then impacts in school for writing stories.
So you've got this bright young person who's often pretty articulate. They can grasp concepts. If you ask them to explain to you what they've learned in words, well, there's no problem at all. But there's this gap that's widening between what they can tell you they've learned and what they can show you when you ask them to put it in print. And then you see the obvious delay in the acquisition of reading.
So they may find it difficult to follow a sequence of instructions. You may notice gaps in their written work, and you may notice that their handwriting might be an issue. You also might notice in mathematics some concerns with regard to remembering facts or times tables or concepts such as time.
There are always these children that you think should be getting it. They're bright, they can answer questions in class, they seem really engaged, and yet when they actually sit down to do their reading and their writing, they seem to have trouble. They're very good at distracting you, so when they're supposed to be doing one particular job, you'll find that they'll be off doing something else, tidying up or looking for books or something like that. So they are, so call them the masters of distraction. So they're always trying to find something to take your attention away from what they can't do.
You know, you get a child who will start misbehaving. You'll get a child who start acting out. You'll get a child who will withdraw. They'll be asking to go to the toilet of all times of the day and night, and you know they don't need to go. And it's those indicators that we need to look for. This is the child who's perhaps not quite grasping what they're meant to be doing in class. When they're looking at the letters on the page of their readers or of their books, they're not decoding easily. It's just really difficult for them.
Phonemic awareness, this capacity to understand and manipulate, by the way, also, so do something with the information about the speech, sounds and language, seems to be very closely related to the cracking of the code in the language. And kids who have a very well established concept of the speech, sounds and the language seem to have a very significant advantage in cracking that code. And kids with dyslexia, we know, have difficulty with establishing that phonemic awareness skill set.
Musician, vicious. That's him. No, that's different one. Really? Vicious.
Yeah. Say musician.
Musician.
Now say it in slow motion and chop off the first part. Music.
Yes.
These guys also have trouble with phonological memory, so they have trouble remembering what has just been said, if you like. Not all of them do, but some of them do. And then there's another area, another skill set under that sort of umbrella of what we call phonological processing, so understanding and processing speech, sounds and language, called rapid automatic naming. So this means being able to look at a set, let's say a very simple visual stimuli like numbers or letters or simple objects like bat, kite, that kind of thing. And kids with dyslexia are slower at naming those compared to kids without.
So what's the name of the letter? What's its name?
M.
Good girl. And the sound? And the picture is a?
Monkey.
Good girl.
Orthographic processing is looking at strings of letters. So not just individual letters and sounds, but recognising, for example, that yacht is a word. Doing that by recognising that string of printed letters and being familiar with it. So orthographic skills aren't related to the sounds, it's more related to the recognition of those printed letters on the page.
Some children struggle with that processing. They seem not to build up this whole, store of what we call mental graphemic representations or MGRs, the knowledge that we can, that there are certain patterns of writing in English that are acceptable, that are legal, and these children have what we say is orthographic processing difficulties.
Some kids will have significant word finding difficulties. And for some dyslexic people, that's an issue. They don't have quick recall of the word to get the meaning, and you probably see it interviewing some of the kids you work with. They'll do this thing called circumlocute, and they'll end up using words like stuff and this, and because they know what they're trying to say, the word's in their vocabulary, it's in the lexicon, but they just can't pull the right door on the filing cabinet to get it out quickly. So not all kids with dyslexia are verbally fluent. and amazing speakers. There's the word finding difficulty that you see every now and then as well.
Memory does come into play. So you find that these children have trouble recalling sight words or learning their sight words. So they don't have that retention. So working on that rote memory, even things like days of the week.
Thursday stop, Friday hop, Saturday spin around like under top.
They have difficulty remembering and recalling that sequence. So I'm guessing then recalling times tables would then become a very difficult thing because it is a rote learning thing. So getting it into that long-term memory seems to be the difficult part.
The thing that marries all of these things together, all those strengths and weaknesses that a child with dyslexia may or may not have, is slow processing speeds. This is the number one accommodation that a child with dyslexia will need for their tests and exams, and that is extra time to allow for slower processing speeds. This is nothing to do with intelligence. A child can be just as intelligent as any other child, but they may be slower to decode the letters on the page. They may be slower with their working memory. They may be slower to understand a concept and apply it.
Sometimes that pressure can build their anxiety, and if they've had years and years of school failure or struggling at school, they can develop anxiety around that as well. So even before you walk into the classroom and you know you're going to have to do a reading task, the anxiety is there, which then slows down your processing speed even more and interferes with that. So it snowballs and just makes it harder and harder for them.
What's really rewarding is to see the changes that are happening now, and they are. At last, there's recognition that at high government level that this is a phenomenon that really needs to be addressed. There is at last informed courses for teachers. The word dyslexia is now used in the community. There are now many parent groups out there saying, yes, we need change. It's now on the political agenda at last.
I hope that this message that I'm trying to bring out will help students like me in primary school and high school so they can see that there's still hope, and whatever it is, just keep on trying, because that's what we are. We're dyslexic, but just keep on doing it.
I feel like I can actually do it. I feel like I can be as good as anyone else. I can do whatever they try and do.
I want to be able to fight for something. If I fight for something I believe in, and I have this passion for dyslexia because I have it, Those people, they fight for it. They have like a family member that has dyslexia, they'll fight for it. And I'm one of those people, I don't want to stand there and just watch kids suffer, because I know how it feels. I know what they're going through. I may not know exactly what they're going through, but I got the same idea around it. And I just don't want to watch people sitting there and hiding, because there's no need to hide when there's so many opportunities out there to get help. And I just don't want to be, I just want to help, and I don't know how to help, and I'm just trying to do the best I can. And this is the way I know that I can, in a way.
And what I think we can all do is help a child to define themselves differently. So it's amazing how quickly the child who struggles with reading becomes a champion in the schoolyard because they're the fastest runner, or they're the best child on the soccer team, or perhaps they're a gun at chess, or maybe they're an incredible singer. So it comes down to the definition of that child, how that child's defined, and how they're perceived by others. It's so easy to take the emphasis off the difficulty and put it on the strength. And that's the thing that teachers need to do. Take that child out of the spotlight for their struggle and put them into the spotlight for their success.
But the misconception that, they have trouble with reading, they're going to have trouble with everything, it's really a myth that needs to be exploded.
Mental strengths come from having to work so incredibly hard to get through school. So what that does is, with the right support, and I'm talking parent support and teacher support, people become incredibly resilient. So everyone else has given up. These kids, these adults, these teens are still there working hard. They are the ones that have the ability to see in big picture, to think outside the square. Outside the square thinking is critical They're the mental strengths that dyslexia can bring. So very critical to moving forward as a human race.
Never give up, and you will find a way to get there. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
It is so very, very easy to convince a child that they are dumb. Even a few years of failure leave scars that never heal. If one child fails to learn to read, we have all failed. Parents, teachers, politicians, and each one of us. There is no educational aim more important.
Dyslexia makes me feel different, but not in a bad way. I like sailing because I can go out there and not think of anything. I see the course in my head and the line that I need to take.
It's important for me to acknowledge that I'm dyslexic, but I don't like to make a big deal of it. When I was young, being dyslexic taught me to work hard to get the result I needed. I think it's also helped me to think outside the square. So I believe that being dyslexic has been critical to helping me achieve what I have. I just hope that other young people see the positive side of being dyslexic.
Every day I swim through a sea of words, of which I can read, spell, and write few. I want people to know that we learn differently, but if you give us a chance, we can be fabulous. I'm very good at talking. I can inspire the Queen, but it's very difficult to write. From a very young age, I had a lot of support from people who haven't made me feel inferior or hopeless.
I understand the power of words and how incredible reading something can change you, and it can make you cry. It's like watching a movie, watching a really good movie, and then you can understand reading books and you feel great because I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. It's about being patient, taking time. Whenever I am asked what I like to do in my spare time, I have an immediate answer. I love to read. I can think of nothing better than curling up with a good book and escaping from the everyday. Most people are surprised by this, as I have a distinct learning difficulty, which makes reading hard and spelling nearly impossible. So if it wasn't for great help early in my education, dedicated parents, and a desire to learn, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't know the joy of a good book. So this documentary is vital to help people understand more about dyslexia, to take away any stigma, to get help early, so children can learn to their full potential in a way that meets their learning needs. Outside the square is a terrific concept, but I know will have an impact.
It can be really hard at times when you can't seem to read, spell, or write properly. Sometimes it might get the better of you, but you just need to stick with it and understand you can beat it. There is no need to be embarrassed or disappointed to suffer from dyslexia, as I see it as a blessing. The things you will learn along the way will be with you for the rest of your life, so get out there and don't let dyslexia hold you back from whatever your dreams are. May they be in academic areas or sport. It sure didn't hold me back. I've learned that dyslexia is my gift, even though at times it seems a curse. I always tell myself, losers say it may be possible, but it's too difficult, while winners say it may be difficult, but it's possible. Learning to read was really difficult. I had to put in a lot of time and effort. If you stay determined, then you can overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Each day I work harder to become the best footballer I can be, and I hope that you're able to apply the same philosophy to anything that you choose to pursue. Persevering will make you stronger, just like hard work makes us Socceroos the best that we can be.
I try really hard at school, but I learn differently to others, and sometimes it's too hard to just keep up, and a lot of people just think I'm slow and even stupid. I love to dance. It takes away all of my worries. I find it's easy, and it lets me be free and have fun. Dancing is what I love. It's my life. My biggest challenge as a child was being embarrassed at making mistakes. It was so debilitating. I thought that everyone else got it right all the time. When I worked out that making mistakes is an essential part of learning for everyone, I realized that I could improve my weaknesses, from spelling to reading to maths. I overcame dyslexia by telling someone what made me feel uncomfortable about any class at school. It is okay. It is not a weakness to say. I tried to never make excuses and be as brave as I could be. I realized that everybody had different strengths. You will find your strengths, even if you haven't found them yet. Yours just isn't going to be in spelling and reading. And I worked out that being different is a really good thing. I have lots of trouble spelling, but I am really good at drawing, making Lego, and gymnastics. Just because you struggle at some things, it doesn't mean you're not awesome at other things. As long as you try your best, that's all that matters. You cannot cure a dyslexic person. Rather, you can teach us the tools needed to be able to get on with learning. We think outside the box. CDP, cool dyslexic person. Don't try to hide from being dyslexic or hide it from your friends. It will only make you stress more about it. Confidence is so important. Read what interests you. Write stories or essays on subjects that you know about. At least you are practicing writing.
Reading and writing is very difficult for me, but I am improving with help. I find working on my Suzuki car with assistance from Dad easier, as I am good with looking at how things work and fixing them. Believe, achieve, succeed. When I was in grade 7 at school, my teacher told me I shouldn't sit for the scholarship examination, as I wouldn't pass because I was hopeless at English. Look how it has all worked out for me, all because of hard work and common sense.
It's not time to give up. It's time to keep on trying. No matter how hard school can be, hang in there a little more longer, even when you feel like you're about to fail, because we have something no one else has. We never give up, even when it gets too hard. There are many people who don't have dyslexia. They give up too fast, but we are determined to push through.